it. She smiled up at Malone and Boyd. "Live dangerously," she said gaily. Malone gave her a hollow laugh. The last man drew one card too, and the betting began. The Queen's remaining 1,000 was gone before an eye could notice it. She turned to Boyd. "Sir Thomas," she said, "another 5,000, please, at once." Boyd said nothing at all, but marched off. Malone noticed, however, that his step was neither as springy nor as confident as it had been before. For himself, Malone was sure that he could not walk at all. Maybe, he thought hopefully, the floor would open up and swallow them all. He tried to imagine explaining the loss of $20,000 to Burris and some congressmen. And after that, he watched the floor narrowly, hoping for the smallest hint of a crack in the palazzo marble. "May I raise the whole 5,000? The Queen said. "It's okay with me," the dealer said. "How about the rest of you?" The 4 grunts he got expressed a suppressed eagerness. The Queen took the new chips Boyd had brought her and shoved them into the center of the table with a fine, careless gesture of her hand. She smiled gaily at everybody. "Seeing me?" she said. Everybody was. "Well, you see, it was this way," Malone muttered to himself, rehearsing. He half thought that one of the others would raise again, but no one did. After all, each of them must be convinced that he held a great hand, and though raising had gone on throughout the hand, each must now be afraid of going the least little bit too far and scaring the others out. "Mr. Congressman," Malone muttered, "there's this game called poker. You play it with cards and money. Chiefly money." That wasn't any good. "You've been called," the dealer said to the first man, who'd opened the hand a year or so before. "Why, sure," the player said, and laid down a pair of aces, a pair of 3s, and a 4. One of the 3s and the 4 were clubs. That reduced the already improbable chances of the Queen's coming up with a flush. "Sorry," said the second man, and laid down a straight with a single gesture. The straight was 9 high, and there were no clubs in it. Malone felt devoutly thankful for that. The second man reached for the money, but under the pop-eyed gaze of the dealer, the fifth man laid down another straight, this one 10 high. The 9 was a club. Malone felt the odds go down right in his own stomach. And now the cowboy put down his cards. The king of diamonds, the king of hearts, the jack of diamonds, the jack of spades, and the jack of hearts. Full house. "Well," said the cowboy, "I suppose that does it." The Queen said, "Please, one moment." The cowboy stopped halfway in his reach for the enormous pile of chips. The Queen laid down her 4 clubs, ace, king, queen, and 10, and for the first time flipped over her 5th card. It was the jack of clubs. "My God," the cowboy said, and it sounded like a prayer. "A royal flush." "Naturally," the Queen said. "What else?" Her Majesty calmly scooped up the tremendous pile of chips. The cowboy's hands fell away. 5 mouths were open around the table. Her Majesty stood up. She smiled sweetly at the men around the table. "Thank you very much, gentlemen," she said. She handed the chips to Malone, who took them in nerveless fingers. "Sir Kenneth," she said, "I hereby appoint you temporary Chancellor of the Exchequer, at least until Parliament convenes." There was, Malone thought, at least $35,000 in the pile. He could think of nothing to say. So Instead of using up words, he went and cashed in the chips. For once, he realized, the government had made money on an investment. It was probably the first time since 1775. Malone thought vaguely that the government ought to make more investments like the one he was cashing in. If it did, the national debt could be wiped out in a matter of days. He brought the money back. Boyd and the Queen were waiting for him, but Barbara was still in the ladies' lounge. "She's on the way out," the Queen informed him, and, sure enough, in a minute they saw the figure approaching them. Malone smiled at her, and tentatively she smiled back. They began the long march to the exit of the club, slowly and regally, though not by choice. The crowd, it seemed, wouldn't let them go. Malone never found out, then or later, how the news of Her Majesty's winnings had gone through the place so fast, but everyone seemed to know about it. The Queen was the recipient of several low bows and a few drunken curtsies, and when they reached the front door at last, the doorman said in a most respectful tone, "Good evening, Your Majesty." The Queen positively beamed at him. So, to his own great surprise, did Sir Kenneth Malone. Outside, it was about 4 in the morning. They climbed into the car and headed back toward the hotel. Malone was the first to speak. "How did you know that was a jack of clubs?" he said in a strangled sort of voice. The little old lady said calmly, "He was cheating." "The dealer?" Malone asked. The little old lady nodded. "In your favor?" "He couldn't have been cheating," Boyd said at the same instant. "Why would he want to give you all that money?" The little old lady shook her head. "He didn't want to give it to me," she said. "He wanted to give it to the man in the cowboy's suit. His name is Elliot, by the way, Bernard L. Elliot, and he comes from Weehawken. But he pretends to be a Westerner, so nobody will be suspicious of him. He and the dealer are in cahoots. Isn't that the word?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Boyd said. "That's the word." His tone was awed and respectful, and the little old lady gave a nod and became Queen Elizabeth I once more. "Well," she said, "the dealer and Mr. Elliot were in cahoots, and the dealer wanted to give the hand to Mr. Elliot. But he made a mistake and dealt the jack of clubs to me. I watched him, and of course I knew what he was thinking. The rest was easy." "My God," Malone said. "Easy." Barbara said, "Did she win?" "She won," Malone said, with what he felt was positively magnificent understatement. "Good," Barbara said, and lost interest at once. Malone had seen the lights of a car in the rearview mirror a few minutes before. When he looked now, the lights were still there, but the fact just didn't register until, a couple of blocks later, the car began to pull around them on the left. It was a Buick, while Boyd's was a new Lincoln, but the edge wasn't too apparent yet. Malone spotted the gun barrel protruding from the Buick and yelled just before the first shot went off. Boyd at the wheel didn't even bother to look. His reflexes took over, and he slammed his foot down on the brake. The specially built FBI Lincoln slowed down instantly. The shotgun blast splattered the glass of the curved windshield all over, but none of it came into the car itself. Malone already had his hand on the butt of the .44 Magnum under his left armpit, and he even had time to be grateful, for once, that it wasn't a small sword. The women were in the back seat, frozen, and he yelled, "Duck, damn it, duck!" and felt, rather than saw, both of them sink down onto the floor of the car. The Buick had slowed down too, and the gun barrel was swiveling back for a second shot. Malone felt naked and unprotected. The Buick and the Lincoln were even on the road now. Malone had his revolver out. He fired the